It's a random Kings fan interview with Gary Schultz on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $150 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. With the LA Kings having 2 weeks off for the Four Nations face-off, we have some time to do some special interviews. We've done a few of these in the past, and I'm happy to get a chance to do one today. It is time for a chat with a random Kings fan, and I am happy to welcome to the show Gary Schultz. Gary, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Eddie. I appreciate it.
Well, definitely want to get into how you became a Kings fan. I want to get your thoughts on this year's team. But for people who enjoy our Friday fan feedback show, they'll probably recognize you when I say Gary in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I looked up the weather in Coeur d'Alene today, high of 20, low of 1.
Yes.
How did you get, I know, right, you're originally from Southern California and that's how you became a Kings fan, but how did you get to Coeur d'Alene and what are you doing up there?
Well, my parents retired here in 1994, and it took them about 10 years of us coming up to visit, but we finally relocated in 2004. So we came up, loved the area. It's a gorgeous place to live. We came up in the winter and the summer, so I knew what it was like in the winter, and it could be -5 in January and 105 in July. That's the swings that we get. But it doesn't last too long either way. That's about the extreme. So that's how we wound up here. My parents retired and we followed them up.
Well, obviously a little bit different than Southern California. And I want to get your background on how you became a Kings fan, but just kind of tell us where did you kind of grow up and how did you get into being a Kings fan?
I was born in Linwood and lived in Southgate till I was 2. And then we moved to Orange County, and that's where I grew up, a town called La Palma. A lot of people don't know where that is. It's by Buena Park. So I lived in Orange County until 2004, and then moved up here. My dad, so the way I became a Kings fan is my dad was a huge sports fan when he was a kid. And he was, when he was a young man, he was a Hollywood Stars fan. And for those that don't know, the Hollywood Stars were a Pacific Coast League team. And this is 40s, early 50s, and they belonged to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And when the Rams moved in 51, he became a Rams fan. And then when the Dodgers moved in 58, he became a Dodgers fan. He actually went to the very first game at the Coliseum. He and a buddy, they were in high school, seniors in high school, and they rode the bus from Southgate to the Coliseum and went to the first Dodgers game. And then when the Kings came, when they were born in 67, he said, I want to check out this hockey thing. And he became a hockey fan. And when my sister and I got a little bit older, I was born in 66. We, as a family, went to our first hockey game in October of 74. So I just celebrated 50 years as a Kings fan. Wow. Went to see the Islanders and the Kings, and I was 8. My sister was 11, and I was hooked. So that's how I became a Kings fan.
Now, I mentioned that you're a frequent emailer to the show, and when you email me, you're nice enough to include some pictures almost all the time. And I did ask if I had your permission to share this picture. So yes. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm going to share a picture, and for those that are listening on the podcast, we'll describe it. But here's one of the pictures that you sent me, Gary. And that's you on the right. Your dad is on the left, and some guy named Wayne Gretzky is in the middle there. And Wayne is looking young, and you are rocking a tremendous mullet that Barry Melrose would be proud of. That's amazing. So obviously, your dad got you into hockey, and got to meet some amazing players like Wayne Gretzky there. But yeah, any good stories you have of seeing the team back, at the Forum, or anything that really is memorable for you growing up and following the Kings, as you mentioned, now 50 years?
Yeah, we started off going to a couple of games the first season, 475 season, and that was, I think it's still the best point season the Kings have ever had. It was 105 points. I could be wrong on that, but I think that was their best season.
That sounds right, yeah.
And they played really well that year. We used to watch him on, it was either KCAL or KTLA had him first, and then they switched. But we were watching him on TV. That was my first playoff heartbreak, because back in those days, it was the best 2 out of 3. And they played Toronto in the first round, had a much better record than Toronto, and Toronto beat them 2 out of 3. So that was my first playoff heartbreak. So that was one of the earliest things. We started going to about 12 to 15 games a year at the Forum, and we were a colonnade family. So if you know the old Forum, there's the loge on the bottom and the colonnade at the top. We were probably in the middle of the top section, usually between the blue lines somewhere. And back in those days, I was 8, 9, 10. My parents would actually let me, in between periods, jump out of my seat and run around the whole concourse by myself and come back to my seat. I couldn't imagine anybody letting their kid do that these days, but that's one of the memories I have at the old Forum, is doing that.
Obviously we had an emailer last week. I don't know if you heard it, but he was talking about how he was against the Gretzky trade because he hated the Oilers and he hated Wayne Gretzky and the way that those teams had their way with a lot of teams, but the Kings obviously were one of them as well. What do you remember of the Wayne Gretzky trade? We showed you your picture with him, and how did that change things here locally? Obviously, I was not living here at the time. I was in college, and I remember being interested in that. Right, even though I wasn't close to it, it got me interested in hockey, and obviously he had a huge impact. What was your how do you remember that trade and how it impacted being a Kings fan?
I respected Gretzky when he was with the Oilers, but I was not a Gretzky fan because the Kings always seemed to lose to them. It's since I've been a Kings fan, it seemed like the Kings always wound up in the division with the best team in the NHL. In the 70s, they were actually in the same division as Montreal when it was the Flying Frenchmen. And then in the 80s, they were in the same division as Edmonton, they were going on their cup run. Once he was traded and started playing for the Kings, I was excited. A lot of my friends that really weren't into hockey got into hockey. And there was a time from about, I'd say 83 to 87 where I kind of stopped going to games, got a little bit older, was a teenager, doing different things. And then once Gretzky came, my friends got into it. So we started going to games again. In the 90s, I used to buy group tickets, a group of 25, and a bunch of us would go. So I can't say that I was for or against the trade. I knew that the Kings would be better, and I don't think I realized the magnitude of him coming to LA, how it would make the NHL and the sport of hockey grow.
Well, we're just getting started with Gary Schultz. He's in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, longtime Kings fan. We're going to get his thoughts on this year's team and some other memories as a Kings fan. We'll do that here next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. You just realized your business needs to hire someone yesterday. How do you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs Put your post at the top of the page to help you reach the right candidates faster. If you've been in that spot where you need to hire right away and the pressure's on and every day without the right person's a setback, that's exactly when Indeed's sponsored job posts come in handy. They'll make sure your job post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. All right, we are continuing with Kings fan Gary Schultz, who is kind enough to give us some of his time today. If you're watching on YouTube, he's got some of his Kings paraphernalia there in the background. I see an Adrian Kempe jersey, a Luke Robitaille jersey. Gary, when you were growing up, who was your favorite player, and do you have a favorite player on the team now?
When I was young, second season I was a fan. They made the Marcel Dionne trade, and I didn't even know who Marcel Dionne was because I was a kid and a new fan. But I loved Marcel Dionne. He was 5'8", 205 pounds of just muscle, and he had tree trunks for legs. He was very hard to knock off the puck. He had speed. He had a shot. So he was my first favorite player. Through the 90s, I became a huge McSorley fan. Thought he was one of the toughest guys in the NHL. He scored 15 goals as a defenseman one season for the Kings. So he was a two-way player. So he was probably my favorite player through the 90s. Then I was a Ziggy Palffy fan. And now I would say Adrian Kempe. I love the all-around game. I love the fact that he's tough. He chirps. He does the when he scores an overtime goal, speed and a shot. So yeah, Kempe is probably my favorite player on the Kings right now.
It's a solid choice. I've always said if I could go back and watch any athlete play, Marcel Dionne would be the guy, because I never saw him play in a game. Maybe you can go find something on YouTube, I'm not sure, and really even highlights. It's such a blind spot for me as a Kings fan, because he was before I became a Kings fan. And you look at the records, and it's just his name's everywhere. And he played on a lot, as you well know, he played on a lot of teams that were not very good, and to do the things that he did playing on those teams, obviously he was a hell of a hockey player. I agree with you about Adrian Kempe, by the way. I was funny. I was at one of my cousin's volleyball games not too long ago, and I turned around, and Marty McSorley sitting behind me. I have no idea why he was there. I assume he was just watching somebody he knew. I didn't think he'd show up at a random high school girls volleyball game, but I remember turning around and being like, oh my God, there's Marty McSorley. So you're in Idaho now. You've
Yes.
been there for a little while, but you still are able to get to see the Kings occasionally. I know you sent me some pictures of you at a Seattle Kraken. Was it a Kings Kraken game? Was that this year or last year that you went and saw him?
That was last season.
Okay.
So
is that the one place you're able to kind of get to see him live in person, or do you still have family here that you come visit and maybe go to a game occasionally?
So we usually come down to Southern California in the summer and wind up going to a Dodgers game. The only time I've been able to come back down during hockey season was in 2015, and we went to see the Capitals play. And so my girls got to see Alex Ovechkin play. That was a big thing for my dad, was taking us to go see guys he thought were going to be Hall of Famers. He took us to go see Gordie Howe. He took us to go see Gretzky when he was with the Oilers, not ever knowing he'd become a King and we'd get to see him all the time after that. Yeah. We went to a Kings Blackhawks game. It's either 76 or 77 to see Bobby Orr. And Bobby Orr only played 26 games total with the Blackhawks, so he was injured, so we didn't get to see him. But yeah, we went down to see the Capitals, and then we went over to Seattle, and I'll go again to Seattle. Seattle's about 4.5, maybe 5 hour drive. So we went over and got a hotel, made a weekend of it. It was pretty fun. Had a great time.
And I know you also get to see some local hockey there, junior hockey, things like that. Are the Idaho Steelheads still around?
I don't even know. They were in Boise, and that's about 7 hours south of us.
Okay.
So yeah, that's we don't go down for that. But the Spokane Chiefs are the local team. Jared Anderson Dolan played for them. It's the Western Hockey League. We've seen Ryan Getzlaff playing with Calgary Hitmen. Saw Carey Price playing for Tri-City Americans. So we get to go see guys that are, some of them are going to become NHLers. The kid on the Chiefs right now, Berkeley Catton, he's a stud. He was the 8th overall pick by the Kraken. And remember that name.
And I know I think you emailed me about seeing Cohen Zimmer, one of the Kings prospects, recently.
Yeah. Yep. We went in December to see him, and he took a puck to the face and had a big gash, but he looks like I think he's going to be on the Reign next year. And if I was going to make a guess, I would target maybe 2027 for him to have a shot with the Kings. He goes to the net. He's on the power play. He's wears an A. So he's definitely got some potential.
Before I get more into your thoughts on this year's team and the season so far, I did want to ask, now there's another Locked On LA Kings fan up there in Court d'Alene. Have you ever been able to hook up with him? Not yet?
No, I was on a plane going to Vegas this last Friday, and I had my Kings hoodie on, and a guy was standing there, and he said he was a huge Kings fan. And I said, "You ever listen to Locked On Kings?" And he said, "No, what's that?" And I said, "Oh, we've got to talk."
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I did want to ask also, clearly you're a hockey fan.
Mm-hmm.
Are you interested in this Four Nations face-off at all?
I will watch the game tomorrow night just to see a little bit of it. If I have time and I'm home, I will watch some other games besides the Kings. I watch the Winter Classic on New Year's Day usually. If I'm home, I'll watch a little bit of the All-Star game, but the All-Star game is what it is now. So I'm kind of interested in this. I'd like to see it. I'd probably watch, I'm going to say at least 70 Kings games a year. For some reason, I watch them on ESPN Plus, and this area has decided that the Kraken, the Vegas Golden Knights, Utah, and the Avalanche are all, and I think it has something to do with Rocky Mountain sports, but we get blacked out on those, so I have to find other places to watch them. But I probably watch about
all
70.
of those, on all four teams?
Yes.
You got to be kidding me.
Yes. So I have to be creative and find different avenues.
Well, you got to love the NHL. They make it very easy for their fans to be able to watch games, don't they? We'll get more detailed into this, but before we go to our next little break here, just your general thoughts on the team so far and how the season's gone.
I think I emailed you and said I thought it was going to take about 30 games before we knew who they were. And they were clicking about that time. Then we had the January, the road trip from Hades. And they seem like they've gotten their game back. Things that have impressed me is Darcy Kemper's play. I did not expect him to be this good. And so that's been huge. I like what we're getting from the kids. I know the kids have been up and down, LaFerriere and Byfield. And I think I think we're getting what we expected from the kids, at least what I expected. Do I think they're a Stanley Cup team? Probably not. Do I think they could make it out of the first round? Absolutely. I love the additions of Edmondson and Tanner Jeannot. I think that's given them some toughness, although Edmondson's contract I could do without, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
I like the team this year. I don't think they're a cup contender right now, but you never know. You got to get hot when the playoffs come.
All right. We will get a little bit more into this year's Kings team, and we are talking with Gary Schultz, longtime Kings fan. We'll talk more here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Well, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place bets live throughout the game, and even if you miss the opening tip-off, you can still be a part of the fourth quarter comebacks and stay in on all the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. FanDuel live bets keep you in every moment of the game and keep it exciting, whether you're backing your favorite team or just looking for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Lakers are playing at the Utah Jazz Wednesday night. Lakers are a 7.5-point favorite. The over-under is 237.5. If you want to get in on that action, right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we're wrapping it up with longtime LA Kings fan Gary Schultz. Gary, how do you feel about the job that Jim Hiller has done this year?
I like him. I've always been the kind of guy that got frustrated when the lines would be moved around and not letting guys stay together. But I really love his philosophy of when a guy doesn't play the power play or the penalty kill, coming out maybe with some different line mates to get some more ice time. I like that philosophy. I think it works, keeps the guys in the game. I don't ever remember a coach doing the 11-7 as much as he's done. So he thinks outside the box. So I think he's done a good job. I think he's got the potential to take them to the promised land eventually. But yeah, if I was going to grade him, I'll give him a B+ so far, maybe an A-.
Yeah, that was pretty cool when he put Kempe on defense the other night and they got the game-tying goal against Anaheim. Just little things like that he's willing to try, I think are pretty cool. Is there any particular part of this team that you have enjoyed this year, or maybe on the flip side of that haven't enjoyed this year, or any particular player you've been kind of pleasantly surprised by, or maybe somebody you've been disappointed in? Any of those kind of things?
I guess I'll go negative first. The power play is horrendous.
Yes.
I can't even. I've got nothing. I don't even know what they can do. I was hoping Doughty would give him a spark, but I think it took him all 6 of these games to really kind of find his game again. So hopefully when they come back, the power play will get better. I've been impressed with Byfield. I think he's giving them what they thought he was going to give them. And it took him a little while because even though center's his normal position, this is center in the NHL. And I think it took him a while, and he's defensively responsible. He's got skills. He's got hands. I like what I've seen from him so far. So yeah, I would say Byfield is somebody that I'm pretty happy with so far.
Well, you've been a fan longer than I have. 50 years, you said. I've been around 30. But you and I both have been around long enough to see Rob Blake and Luc Robitaille play for the Kings. They're now obviously 2 major pieces running the franchise. You've got a Robitaille jersey back there. You probably listened to the episode where I went and had lunch with him with some other fans recently. And it's hard not to like Luc. It's hard, Rob's not at all as outgoing and as engaging as Luc is. Luc is a guy that, he will talk to anybody and you'll have fun talking to him. How do you feel about where the franchise is right now and about those 2 guys kind of leading the franchise? I think, not to answer the question for you, but I mean, as a fan and as somebody who covers the team, I have fond memories of those guys as players. I can separate though, from what they were as players to what they are now. I do, in a sense, I like the fact that they're kind of from the family. I think that they probably care a little bit more about the franchise than someone else who, wants to do a good job, but came from somewhere else. But at the same time, there's that feeling of how long are they getting more extra rope because of who they are. And at some point, this seems like a pretty important season, right? To see how is it going to turn out and what direction the team goes after this, depending on how they do in the playoffs. So I guess I just wanted to ask, how do you kind of feel about the state of the franchise and about the people that are running the franchise right now?
Well, the ownership group obviously will put the money in to do what needs to be done. The thing about Rob Blake is he seems to overpay on some contracts sometimes. And like you've said more than once, I like a general manager who's going to swing for the fences sometimes. And he did that with the PLD trade, and it did not work out. I don't know if that was because PLD's attitude, or they just put him in a situation where he was not going to succeed. And then he was able to unload the contract and get Darcy Kemper, who's been phenomenal. So do we reward him for fixing something that was really bad? Sort of. I don't know. I think the playoffs are definitely going to determine whether he comes back with a new contract. Rob Blake, Luc Robitaille, I love the guy. I've loved him since he was a rookie. Dave Tiger Williams is the one that coined him Lucky, gave him the nickname Lucky. And he's just, like you said, he's just a guy that you just want to maybe sit and have a beer with him because he's such a nice guy. Should he continue in the role that he's in right now? That's above my pay grade. So I like the direction in some aspects. Some maybe not so much. I think the cap going up is really going to help. And it just seems to me like they're going to try to build as long as they have Kopitar and Doughty. After those two leave, it might be somewhat of a retool maybe after that, and we'll see where they are. I don't know if either one of them will be back next year.
Well, Gary, it was great to get to have a conversation with you. I've enjoyed your emails. I am sure you'll continue to email the show. I greatly appreciate you selling the show to any Kings fans you see out there. Very kind of you. Thank you very much. And thanks for joining us and sharing some of your thoughts and some of your memories of being a Kings fan.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eddie. And I got to give a shout out to Rich in San Pedro. He's a buddy of mine, and he's the one that turned me on to this show. So kudos to Rich.
Yeah, and Rich lives like a couple blocks from me. So if you ever come back to visit Rich, we'll have to get together and go have a Busy Bee sandwich or something like that.
For sure.
All right, Gary. Take care. Stay warm up there in Idaho, and we'll touch base with you with an email or two as we go along in the season. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks again for doing this.
Thanks, Eddie.
All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Every once in a while, I do like to check in and talk to a random Kings fan out there and just kind of get their story. I love meeting Kings fans. I meet Kings fans when I go to the games. Maybe I met with you out there. And I just like having conversations, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that as well. For you everydayers, those of you that listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Wednesday, we will have the opening game of the Four Nations Face-Off, which will feature the two LA Kings that are involved, Adrian Kempe and Team Sweden, going up against Drew Doughty and Team Canada. We're going to talk about how they do and that game in particular. Probably also have another scouting report on a possible target for the LA Kings at the upcoming trade deadline, and any other Kings news that happens to be out there. We'll talk about that as well. Hope you join us then. If you want to get in on the fan feedback show that we talked about every Friday, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section as well. And love you to stay interactive with the show on X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.